Good morning, my lovely people, and welcome to another episode of The Daily Dose with me, Dr. Essa. Today's episode, we're going to be discussing spirituality in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the number one question I've been getting asked from a lot of people is, do you blame God for this? Is this God's way of trying to punish us? How do you process all of this? And the simple answer is no. I don't think that God is trying to punish us. I don't think that God ever wants to punish us. I think that in life, God gives us a lot of tests that may challenge us, that may push us to be better, or maybe just to reflect and think on why a certain affliction falls upon us. Like, for example, you write a test and you fail the test. Are you going to go back and blame God? No. Maybe that's the test is the test. God's trying to test you. So you go home, you think about it. Instead of blaming God, you reflect and go, what could I have done better? How could I have changed this scenario? And what can I do in the future to avoid this happening to me again? And that's the challenge. That's what God wanted out of you. And that's how I understand my life. Now, I don't think that science and religion are mutually exclusive. They require each other. Now, I'm going to say something controversial, something you may or may not have heard before, but I believe that God, whichever one you believe in, or not if you don't believe in God, you got to admit there is something called nature. Whether you want to refer to it as Mother Nature or just nature, there's nature. Now, I believe God created nature. And in His infinite power and wisdom, He designed nature to be self-sustaining. Now, if you look at science, there's a term called carrying capacity. Take a square kilometer piece of land. You got two people in there. Now, those people reproduce, make a lot of more babies, and those babies reproduce, they make even more babies. There's a certain point in the square kilometer of land, a certain point that a population reaches, where all the resources in that land, all the natural resources, all the earth for farming, all the water in that piece of land will be depleted by a certain number in the population. That's known as the carrying capacity. And once you reach that or exceed that, that piece of land becomes obsolete. You can't use it anymore. In fact, the people and the quality of life for those people diminishes drastically, which is what we're seeing in the world. People are living in poverty. People are living without clean running water or basic sanitation. And why? Because we've got too many people. That's the unfortunate truth. Medical advancements in technology has superseded our wildest dreams. Like, the average age that you would die at just 50 years ago was about 35, 40, depending if you're male or female, right? Because men tend to die younger because we're idiots, and women live a little bit longer. But the average lifespan was like 35, 40. Now we're looking at 55 to 60 for a woman now. Almost 60 years old. That's the average lifespan in the world, which is crazy. We're living so much longer than we ever did before because we pretty much have the cure for everything. So, I believe that nature was designed to control itself. With global warming, mass pollution, and having this many people, that would have been inevitable. The earth is damaged. And we see this every so often. Every 100 years or so, you see another outbreak. That's nature. Nature is doing that. through mutations in bacteria, viruses, a new outbreak comes along that we have to figure out how we're going to deal with it. The last one was influenza in 1918. Before that was the Black Plague that wiped out millions in Europe. And why? Because the earth just can't handle that many of us. That's the unfortunate truth. And it might be controversial, but that's what I feel. We've reached our carrying capacity, and this is nature's only way of fighting back. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge from God. It's a challenge from nature for us as medical professionals to try and preserve life, but also for us to look inwards towards ourselves. Which leads me to the next question I commonly get asked is, how have you coped with this spiritually? And I think most importantly for me, there's a term in Islam called taqdeer, of fate, the understanding of your fate or your destiny. This year, I made a decision after many years of doing stand-up comedy and practicing as a medical doctor that I would pursue stand-up comedy because it was taking up too much of my time. I wasn't able to travel, do shows around the country, tour. And it's not that I didn't like medicine. It's just that I really like comedy. And I thought to myself, in 20, 30 years' time, I might regret it if I never take the opportunity to go ahead and do this. And then when the COVID-19 pandemic came out and hit the globe, slowly but surely I started to realize that they were going to ban mass gatherings and comedy may become obsolete in this time. Not that it's not necessary, but live performances of stand-up comedy would become obsolete. And so my plans for one-man show tour this year have been crushed. I've not been able to do that. And it's been tough. It's been really difficult coming to terms with that. But I think that although I may have made this plan, God is the best of planners. And this is the master plan He has written for me. And perhaps this is the time in my life where society and my country at this point needs me the most. And yes, I will still continue to entertain you through this lovely podcast, but they need me elsewhere, on the front lines, to fight against this deadly virus. And so, apart from fate or understanding fate and destiny, I think it's important to engage in prayer, to be grateful for all that you have, to also find a sense of peace, to log off from social media and the world, and to reflect on your life and reflect on how we can make this world a better place, how we can help our fellow human during this difficult time. It's one thing just to pray and, look for guidance in your own life, but action is also as important. Go out there, go donate some of your old clothes, food to someone that requires it right now. There's a lot of people that are suffering due to the economic losses caused by this virus. So apart from just prayer, peace, meditation, getting spiritual guidance, you also need to act upon it. Go out there. Be active in your society, in your little microcosm. Even if it's just the guy that's standing on the street corner still and the government hasn't been able to place him in a shelter at this point. It's important. Now, people have asked me this, and this is even more controversial. And they asked me, how do I think organized religious groups have dealt with these restrictions? Now, I don't want to talk too much about other religious groups because that's not my field of expertise. Neither am I an Islamic scholar, but my religion is Islam, and I do have an opinion on how it has been dealt with. So when the initial restrictions came out of the banning of mass gatherings, Obviously, congregations like mosques, churches, synagogues, you name it, were allowed to still have their organized prayers. Now, the Muslim Council of South Africa made the decision that they would abide by these laws of gatherings of 100 or less by allowing people to pray only 100 at a time, a brief, short prayer, and then they would have to leave. If there were more than 100, they would pray in more congregations. So they would pray subsequently one after the other. However, the problem with this is, firstly, as I've mentioned before, the government thumbsucked this number of 100. There's no fact or evidence behind this number of 100. So now they're not using proper medical knowledge for their reasoning. They're using the government's policy and working within the law. So legally, yes, they're covered, they're fine. But I'll explain why this is problematic. In my opinion, the preservation of life comes before all in Islam. Like there's many stories of the Prophet, peace be upon him, saying that in times of war, in times of struggle, if people put a knife to your face and ask you to convert, you say that you convert, and in your heart, you know what's true. In times of struggle, there are times where you can, if you don't have meat that is halal, you can eat non-halal meat. There are provisions that can be made in extenuating circumstances. Now, I'm not saying that praying in congregation is bad. No, there's a lot of blessings, and we know about this. There's plenty in the Quran and in the Hadith, which are the stories from the Prophet, peace be upon him, that we know that there's benefit in praying in congregation. It increases the love and, in communities. It's a good feeling to be praying next to your fellow brother and sister, But at the same time, at what cost? Because we understand that when you're praying, especially if you're Muslim, you pray shoulder to shoulder, very close contact with each other. You then put your head onto a mat, right? Now, most mosques are carpeted floors, which are petri dishes for any bacteria or virus to grow. Carpets, worse. Now, you've got a carpet. You're putting your head and your hands against this carpet. Everything that's on this carpet is going to get onto your hands. There's no way you can clean this carpet every time someone prays on it. Your nose, your mouth, if you've got the virus or somebody had the virus and prayed there just before you, you're definitely getting it. You're breathing directly whatever was there before. So you're praying there, and by limiting the number to 100, it's not going to stop that from happening. Now, in other countries like Canada and I think it was another Northern American, but I know definitely Canada. Now, Canada took a different approach. They said, look, we'll pray in far smaller congregations of about 40 people, and we'll keep the gap between each person to a meter. Everyone bring their own prayer mat from home. They pray and then they leave. Sensible, but still, trying to make provisions in a difficult time. But for me, the most important thing is the preservation of life. If even one person gets infected from that congregation and dies subsequently to that, or then that person infects somebody else who dies, was that prayer really worth it? And do you think that God is not going to forgive you for not praying in congregation and rather praying at home where it's safer? In times of war, in times of plague, there are verses in the Quran and in the Hadith that prove this, that make provision to allow you to do your prayer at home if it's going to endanger your life or endanger the lives of others. And in this circumstance, I believe, in my own opinion and in my medical opinion, it will affect the lives of others. And in South Africa, thankfully, we haven't had or heard of any prayers in congregation that had mass outbreaks. But in Bloemfontein, where they had a church congregation, just before the announcement of the restrictions, they had a church congregation of 5,000 people. Now, bear in mind, this was at a time when Corona was known to be in our country. So internal transmission was going on. And 5,000 people gathered in Bloemfontein. And what happened? 5 people of that 5,000 tested positive. One of them was actually one of the pastors. So you see, you're not protected. Doesn't matter how much you pray. You are not protected from this. So now those 5 people tested. Now all those 5,000 people are now trying to be traced by the government. There's possibilities that all 5,000 of them, if traced, will be kept in quarantine and in isolation. So they'll be forced to pray at home anyway. But now you've gone and infected 5,000, and those 5,000 have infected at least, if they have 1 or 2 family members living with them at home, exponentially it's in like 10,000 now. Who knows how many people they've infected? And so that's just my take on the matter. Take precautions and trust God. They're not mutually exclusive. Don't think that because you pray and because you prayed in congregation or you believe that you're safe. No, you're not safe. You still need to take precautions. And I think that it's important to understand that yes, you need to have your faith, but take it as a test. This could just be a test, a simple test to make us understand that we need to wash our hands. Or if we truly introspect and do a lot of prayer and a lot of thinking, maybe it's a test for us to realize that poor people need running water and shelter. Because now we see how detrimental to us that is as a society. When poor people, the poorest in our society, don't have the basic needs, they will inevitably cause the greatest amount of spread of this virus because they have no way of social distancing. They have no way of being apart from each other. Maybe that's what we are. That's what we've been given this test for. That's what we need to realize. Now, I know we've been a very serious, but like on a little bit of a lighter note, just don't be reckless, man. You know that faith healers have not come out to try and cure anyone of the coronavirus. You know, those some evangelical pastors have come out promising people to cure them from HIV, making people walk, making the blind see, all of that stuff. But when it comes to corona, even they are afraid. No one is willing to come out to try and cure people of corona. People have brought back people from the dead, but they can't save you from corona. No amount of Jik Domestos or doom will save you from this thing. You've got to be safe. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Those are the things that are going to protect you. And staying at home, obviously. And lastly, it's very important not only to maintain your spirituality, but also your morality during this time. I've spoke about this before, and I'll say it again. Exploiting others during this time, for me, is the worst type of sin. We've seen many companies, businesses inflating their prices much higher than they require them to be, just to make a profit off of other people's pain. There are businesses that are going bankrupt. There are people in the masses being retrenched and losing their jobs. And you now want to take advantage of people. Well, I hope that you have a very good explanation for God because He's coming for you. Yes, I'm talking to all you people who sell basic goods and services at inflated prices. And not just that, masks and gloves. Oh my God, I can't talk about this enough. Every day, I see more and more people on my social media and everywhere else selling masks and gloves at 10 times the price that they are worth. I can't understand you people. Yes, we know that there is a lot of data and information that says that these things help, but if every single South African cannot afford, or you cannot provide every single South African with gloves and masks, it's not going to help us all as a society. We're running out, so stop selling them, donate them to your nearest public hospital, and let medical professionals who really require them use them so that they protect themselves and their family from being infected. So now, tell me what's going to happen when we run out, or when you've sold all of them to your rich friends, who then are going to use them to drive around in their fancy cars and go to their fancy houses and live their great lives. Whereas us medical professionals who are seeing, dealing, and testing COVID-19 positive patients, we are the ones that are going to suffer. We are going to get infected. Then I'm going to come home to my wife, infect her. Then she's going to get infected. Then other people are going to get infected from her. So it's tough for us. We're all having to make sacrifices. And I think that it's extremely important to be spiritual, to be mindful, and to maintain your morality. So that's been another episode of the Daily Dose. I hope you guys have enjoyed. It's a little bit serious, but hey, sometimes we got to talk about these things. So I hope you guys enjoyed. My name is Essa. Thank you guys for listening. Tune in tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Dose. Peace, love, assalamu alaikum.